All right. Now, I happen to be in a house where I've been painting, and oh yeah, I need to do this other video on my computer for our hard copy. There we go. So now I'm going to read a storybook. Not a storybook, but this is a book about descendants of David Y. Yoder, and it's going to be quite interesting, I think, to read the stories in there before you get to the descendants. I got this book from someone who is married to the nephew, I think, of the person who wrote the book. On October the 5th, 2001, she wrote me this letter, and apparently I had met her at a funeral, which I had forgotten I did. I gotta watch my phone so they don't fall down. I'm gonna read the letter. On page 24, I have circled the man that leads to your family. That was Daniel D. Yoder. And, well, just let me read the letter. Follow the numbers. Oh, that would be boring as far as that part. They lived at Oakland, Maryland on the first farm on your right as you leave Gortner. So I showed y'all pictures on Facebook about the farm. I showed you the farm and his signature in the barn. And then she talks about the cemetery where his wife was buried, and he and the little baby are buried, and how that they died when the baby was just had been born. Maybe a week later the baby died, and maybe a month later she died. And then she also talks about how when Daniel D. Yoder had gone to Oregon before he was married, he and his sister did. And then Daniel was so homesick that he cried, and he had no money, and they sent him money to come back east. So I'm not going to bore you with the letter. I have not yet read this book, so I'm going to read to you as I read it for myself. Lauren says, "Is that a shower behind you? Just don't forget to turn the video off before you jump." Before you jump in the shower. I've already had a shower. I'm in the bathroom because I had no other table in the whole house. I'm here at the counter in the bathroom. Who all we got watching here? We got Lou Davis is watching too. Quickly tell the story. Okay. Madeline Platts is watching, and Daniel Sorchentuber is watching. Okay. No, I'm not going to take a shower while I'm on Facebook. General introduction. In a work of this kind, there is always a large amount of work and time required. Many of you have been so helpful in furnishing us with information. Well, we don't care so much about all of that, I don't think. Yoder forefathers were not perfect, even as who came after have not been perfect. Hidden among these pages will be many instances of failures and also triumphs of a faith which could not be shaken. Our prayer is that the Yoder book may be a means of helping us all to live for him who made us as he would have us to live. This is true. Sad part about it is, though, these people were Amish, and I don't know how well they knew how to please God, because they were pleasing him by their works. But we're not going to get into that right now, I don't guess. Let's see. I might come back to some of this stuff a little later. David Yoder history. So this is David Y. Yoder. The Daniel D. Yoder that I spoke of was this man's son. So this man is my triple great grandpa. The David Yoder family was full of life. And I've never read this, so y'all are getting it fresh. And were I don't know what that means. Endower with their full share of love and activity and fun. Oh, they were endowed with it, okay. It was kind of like they were gifted with it. So it was natural for them to become involved in incidents which left a more or less abundant store of stories. And by the way, when I had said a couple weeks ago I was going to read a story, this was not it. But this came up since then, and I felt like I needed to read this first. Their share of stories about their activities, and this line as well as the ordinary work activities, which were routine. It was said that Urias was boiling sugar water in the evening after supper and decided he would like to fry an egg at the sugar camp, so he went to the chicken house and got an egg and took it along, thinking he would fry it at the furnace. Here it was so hot that he could not stand it to stay close enough to the fire with the egg. So he decided he would put it in the skimmer ladle and hold it over the chimney as the top and do the frying there. He crawled up, he held it over the edge of the chimney and heard it frying apparently in proper order, and it was going to see whether it was about done. At that time a gust of wind blew the smoke and heat into his face. In trying to avoid them, he lost his balance and fell off the roof and never did find the egg, but he did recover the ladle. All that was lost was the egg. Oh, I thought that was going to be a bad story. Well, it could have been worse. He lost an egg. As there were a number of the boys in the family, not too many years apart, they would delight in playing tricks on each other. As many of these tricks were recounted in later years, some of them only amusing, and some of them a little more involved. A neighbor came by the name of Zimmerman, who lived a few miles from the Yoders, was a real German who was one. Some of them, they loved to initiate. He had a very fine, high-pitched voice. I wish they would have put larger print in here. And I wish they wouldn't have made so many mistakes, too. Now, where was I? The boys thought it was fun to imitate, okay, him, and once when Zimmerman passed the Yoder home, some of the boys hollered at him and tried to imitate him as he talked to Zimmerman and just said, oh, that's Dutch, I think, or German. Just wart, probably wat, which means wait. Just wait. Bis ich dich or vish. Don't know what that means. Don't know what that is. Just wait. Oh, yeah, he puts it in English. Just wait till I get a hold of you. He did not like for them to be making fun at him. Dan was the main one. He was scared a little, but figured Zimmerman will likely soon forget about it. Sometime later, Dan was sent on an errand which took him past the Zimmerman home on horseback. Naturally, Dan thought of the earlier incident, and sure enough, Zimmerman was coming out to the road toward him. He did not like to turn back and hope he would not have any trouble with the old man. But when they were about even, Zimmerman took hold of the bridle of Dan's horse and said, I don't know how to say that. Warm hast du nicht so augie spot? I don't know what that is. Oh, why did you mock me so? Dan threw briefly and thought briefly, I guess is what he meant to say, and said, "Oh, Selwer du Dan." Oh, that was Dan. I don't know what he's getting at there. Zimmerman took the second look and said, Nu, ich hab gimme and Swarty. I don't know what that is. Oh, I thought it was you. That's a lot of words out there for such a short sentence. Zimmerman left go of the bridle, turned and walked away. Dan was sure he was in for a thrashing, but rode away chuckling how he had escaped. Anyhow, that was confusing. So I'm not exactly sure how all that went now in that paragraph. David partly raised Russigal. I guess that was a dog, I don't know. He was not of the Amish faith, but during his stay in the Yoder's family, he learned much from David. One would have thought David had enough boys of his own, but for some reason, Russ was taken in as part of the family. Oh, okay. Russ Engel. He raised Russ Engel. Let's see what he's saying. Russ was taken in as part of the family. Russ, too, was very full of life and fun, and Jonas, Roxy, being nearest his age was naturally his buddy. The two did quite a bit of running around together and had many plans of their own, not all of which were approved by David. Sometimes they came home late at night and said, and David decided to look um, the door so they would need to wake him. Oh, lock the door. So they need to wake him and get in. And he would find out what time they came home. My parents never did that. My parents always trusted me. They didn't never ask me where I was the night before or how long I was gone or anything. I guess they probably knew when I come in. But they trusted me. They weren't uptight about me being out late. But I guess each parent is different about such things. Now I lost my place here. Russ and Roxy decided they would get on the porch roof with a ladder and in through the window. So one day, when David had gone away, the boys nailed strips fast at the corner of the house underneath the grapevine that had grown up along the house and which was supposed to carry their weight up to the porch roof. Roxy was a heavy-set young man of considerable weight, and one night when they wished to get in without being found out, they decided to make use of their improvised ladder. Russ went up first, which worked just fine, but then Roxy started, but before he got all the way up, the strips let go, and due to the extra weight, down came Roxy, grapevine and all. Russ stood on the roof and looked down at Roxy. Asked if he was still living. Roxy just said yes. Go down on the inside and open the door so I can get in. So the two had the grapevine to fix back up again. At another time, David's had gone to town. The boys wanted to have a little fun, so they tied two of their steers' tails together and let them out of the barn to see what would happen. The animals started pulling and twisting to get away from each other. And one of them tore the other one's tail off. Uh-oh. I bet they got in trouble for that. That is so mean. This sobered the boys as they did not know what David would say when he found it out. When David came home, the boys were very helpful to unhitch the horse and did their best to have David in a good humor when he saw the steers without a tail. When David saw it, he asked the boys what happened. So the boys told him when they let the steer out, the dog got after them. So they lied about it. The sugar camp building on the farm was old and not in good condition anymore. And one day in the season, while several of the boys were hauling the sugar water, and Urias was doing the boiling, a heavy wet snow broke down the roof. Urias did not get caught, but he thought he would have a little fun when they came in with a load of sugar water. So he crawled under one of the heavy timbers as though he had been caught. When the other boys came in, with their load and saw that the roof had collapsed. They rushed in to see whether Uriah was hurt. Finding him under the timber, they tried to lift it, but it was too heavy. They got other pieces of timber and tried to pry it up so Uriah could get out. It still would not budge, but when had his fun with them, he crawled out laughing. The others did not appreciate the joke at all and were quite stern with Uriah for a while. I see we got more people watching here. Jonah, Furman, and Howard. David's corn was cut by hand and hauled in the barn, where it was husked later. In rough weather, they had no way to cut the fodder, so it was fed to the cattle as it was, and the animals picked out what they wanted, and the rest was thrown out of this manger and used for bedding. The boys did not like so many long stalks to be disposed of, and so they left them in the troughs to make the cattle eat more of them. David would come along and push his hand down through the stalks and throw them out, so the boys put a layer of cow manure to discourage of this, and David did not understand how the cattle could manage to get things mixed up. When he caught on to what was happening, he put a stop to it. When David's son Daniel was born, they were in the need of someone to help with the work and care for the baby. So David went by horseback to the White Creek community west of Negro Mountain where Jacob Sumi lived. Now this sounds like New Mexico. I wonder if they lived in New Mexico at the time. Not exactly sure whether they did or not, but well, no, I think this was in Pennsylvania. Okay, I could be mistaken about New Mexico. All right, I'll keep reading. So they went where Jacob, somebody lived to get Mary, Jacob's daughter, as a maid. Yeah, the Summies lived in Myersdale area, and they married into the family later. That's true. Jacob Summy was married to Rebecca Stevenson, Stephanus, I guess is what that is. And they were the parents of John Summy, who was born February 9 of 1826 and died April 11th of 1884. John was the father of Elizabeth Solomon, Perry, Benjamin, and Gertrude. Solomon was married to Catherine Speicher, daughter of John C. and Christina Miller Speicher. Their children were Benjamin Yost and Jacob, and two others who died in infancy. Are we gonna get into genealogy here? Um, David was born and raised in the old homestead, now owned by Noah J. Yost Yoder. The first owner of the farm got the land warrant on October 1785, who sold it to his son Henry. Henry sold it to Yost, his son, and Yost sold it to his son David. David in turn sold it to his son John, who sold it to Joe, and the final turnover was to Noah. The farm has remained in the Yoder possession since 1785 and thus handed down from father to son for 7 generations. It is not known whether the first Yost ever lived on the farm or not, but it is presumed he lived in the Lancaster vicinity and just bought the farm for his son Henry, who bought it from Yost about 7 years later. The house in which David Yoder lived was probably built by his great grandfather Yost Yoder, whom he got the farm by warrant. I don't know what they mean by warrant. Maybe that's what they call a deed back then. It was a log house, well built, perhaps because of Indians. The doors were on 2 sections, upper and lower, like stable doors, so that the lower part could be closed and the upper part open, which in the summertime allowed air circulation without being entirely open. When Yost, David's father, was a widower, he could not get around very well to a room. So a room was built to the house for him. So many old people, old people are, he was interested in what was going on, so he bored a hole through the wall between his room and the adjoining room to peep through to see when they had company. The boys would sometimes hang something over the hole to shut the view off. Also, one day one of the boys put on a shawl and bonnet and came in from the barn, knowing Yost would see them. Soon the old man came over into David's part of the house to see who the visitor was. "Who is here?" he asked. The others said there was nobody. He said he had seen someone come in from the barn with a shawl and bonnet on. Then the boys told him that they had done what they had done and laughed about it. When Daniel and his sister Susanna were grown, they decided they want to go west. They went as far as Illinois, where they stayed a while. Dan got married there, and later they moved to Oregon, where Susanna also got married, and both of them began farming there. But Dan became homesick and kept on writing back home about it. He was so homesick, he felt physically sick sometimes for a week or more. Susanna, too, thought often of the old home back east, but she did not mind it so much as Dan. Dan wrote home that if they had any money to move back, they surely would do so. But they were too poor to even attempt it. Finally, David and the boys went together and built a house for them on the home's farm, the old Abe Yoder house, which is not standing anymore, and planned that Dan should have part of the farm. They sent money for a train fare so Dan could move back. Susanna said she too had homesick, and nobody sent her any money to come back east. So she just was not coming back, and she never did, except a few times on a visit, but spent the rest of her life in Oregon. When I goes into genealogy there, and kind of cut off from his story. I don't get that. Solomon D. Yoder. After grandfather Solomon D. Yoder was married to Barbara Yutzi, they lived on the Simon S. Miller farm near Springs, PA. A short time from there they moved to the farm later owned by Jacob S. Miller near Grantsville, during which time his first wife died, leaving grandfather with two small boys and a baby daughter. He married the second time while he was living on the farm. From the Miller farm, he moved to the Benedict Beachy farm about 5 miles south of Grantsville, Maryland, and from there to the farm he bought from Benio Nagy, located about 3 miles west of Grantsville. My earliest recollection of grandfather is the time he and his second wife, Catherine Yutzi Moss Yoder, lived on this farm. When grandfather retired from active farming, my father, Harvey S. Yoder, rented the farm from him. The person that wrote this article is Alvin H. Yoder, a grandson of Solomon D. Yoder. So different people are writing pieces in here. My earliest recollection, maybe I did read that. I well remember how we would go after this mail at the mailbox, about 1/4 of a mile from home. Oh, I used to do that. We had 1/4 mile for the highway, and every day I would watch for the mail carrier. And one year, I would see the mail carrier come out from behind the trees, and I would run. He had 2 sets of mailboxes to get to at that point before he got to our set of mailboxes and for the people in our street. And I would run, and I got across the highway because the highway didn't have as much traffic as it does nowadays, and it wasn't as wide either. I would get to the mailbox before he got there and was waiting. And one year he gave me a box of cookies for Christmas. About 1/4 of a mile from home, and we would bring grandfather's mail along also. But suddenly he decided he wanted to get his mail at the box, and he saw to it that he would go for it before we would get started. We boys were too stupid to catch on or realize that anything unusual was going on, but later we found out that he was corresponding with Mrs. Hirschberger, and he did not want us to know it. One day he decided he would ride one of the horses to the mailbox for his mail. He led his horse along the side of the large water trough outside the barn, stepped on the trough to get on the horse. His foot slipped and he fell full length into the water. There was hardly a dry stitch of clothing on him. Getting out of the water, He went into the house to change clothing, and when he went through the yard, he met my mother and complained to her that I was laughing so at him when he fell in. I do not remember that he had said anything, but of course I could see only the funny part of it. I see we got a couple more people watching. We got Sevilla and we got Cornell watching. I can't imagine that very many people are up at this time of the night. I don't know how many people are awake. Norman Solemnity Yoder story by Ms. Myra Bender Moss. I have many pleasant memories of Grandfather Yoder, as we called him, because he was married to my step-grandmother Hershberger. He was a rather tall and heavy-set man. When he married my step-grandmother, they moved into the house next door to us and Christian Bender family, where Simon and Verta Beachy were now living. Grandfather spent many days sitting in his rocking chair on the front porch. He loved to read, and he read the Bible through 3 times and the New Testament 22 times. Wow. He enjoyed reading the Herald der Wahrheit, whatever that means, or the Gospel Herald, that's what it's called, and the Budget. With his spyglasses, he liked to watch the neighbors at work in their fields and people passing on the road. Oh, I used to go out on the highway, next to the highway, and sit on the bank and watch cars go by for hours. I enjoyed that. One day he saw the neighbor pig and remarked that it looked as near he thought he could almost hear it grunt. Grandfather and grandmother were good friends of children and often gave them candy. They were always kind to us and never seemed to become impatient with us. They would remember us with presents at Christmas and Easter time. In the summer it was not unusual for them to bring us a bucket of fresh ripe strawberries or peas from their garden, and when we would have home made ice cream, they would not hesitate to join us also. They were not forgetful to entertain strangers, which also included tramps, which were quite numerous in those days. I well remember when the 2 of them came to our house one evening, and they both found lodging with grandpa's. Because our parents were not at home, on one occasion when one of these visitors were at grandpa's, grandmother served cake without icing. After he had eaten 3 pieces, grandpa passed other food to him, but he said, "This pone is good enough." He thought it was corn pone. Grandfather was very particular about having correct time and set his watch and clocks by the sun. He told many interesting things of long ago. The following is a problem he would often ask people to explain. I have 6 children. My wife had 6 children. and together we had 3 children. People could seldom give that correct answer. Then he would explain, it was my first marriage, I had 3 children, and my second wife with her first husband had 3 children. And together we had 3 children, and all lived together, so we had 9 children. That is quite a puzzle there. Grandfather and grandmother visited many elderly and sick people and relatives in this community as well as neighbors. She was a very helpful person in the neighborhood and especially in our family. Now, you do realize, I guess, I'm reading stories about back in the 1800s. Sometimes as she was walking on the road, she was knitting as she went. Well, that's kind of like people texting or reading Facebook as they walk. Nowadays, you see them cross the road and you wonder if they even know that you're there with your car. I mean, what happens when people are walking and someone comes with an electric car that they can't hear? Then what? They were very faithful in attending church service, and many times when our church had Sunday school in the afternoon and no service in the forenoon, as was the custom at that time, they would walk down the hill to the old order church service at Flag Run Meeting House. They had seldom missed a service except on cold winter days. They always traveled with horse and buggy or sled. They had their daily devotion. At his funeral service, a statement was made that speaks for itself. We no more hear the audible prayer which we so many an evening heard. A certain prayer which he often prayed can be repeated by members of his family to this day. After having, why didn't they write what that prayer was then? After having lived in this home 14 years, grandfather died after a very short illness in 1926, and grandmother died in our home December in 1927. That's the year my parents were born, was 1927. We appreciated them very much and are grateful for the influence their lives and had on our lives, and for the blessed privilege of having had such a step grandmother and grandfather, or step grandfather and grandmother. But I don't know if they were both steps or just the grandfather was a step. I'm not sure. It's not very well explained, but maybe I missed it earlier. Well, let's see if we got time for another story. There are so many stories in here. It's gonna have to wait. Because how many more pages of stories? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And how many did I read? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I read 8 pages. I got 12 left to go. So I guess what I will do, I'll stop there and read more later. So I hope y'all enjoyed the stories. Some of them were not as interesting as others in there. But hopefully those other 12 pages will be even more interesting than what the first 8 pages were. I see John is watching. So that was that. This was written by Eli Brenneman. I guess he's the descendant of David Y. Yoder. And I got this book in 2001. So this is a book about this ancestors of the 1800s. It's quite interesting what I found. And if you go back to a couple weeks ago when I was in Oakland, Maryland, and looked at the farm where David Y's son Daniel lived, you'll see the story about that. And when I found this book in my possession, I realized I had never gone to see the farm yet. Totally forgot I had the book and did not ever read it. And so when I found it, I said, I gotta go to Oakland, Maryland. So that's what I did a couple weeks ago. I found the farm and I found the grave of the child and the grave of Daniel's wife. And so I have a story about it on Facebook from a couple weeks back. So if you go back there and look at it, you can get the story there. So that was this David Y. Yoder's son. So that wraps it up for tonight, I guess. And so I hope that y'all have a great sleep time tonight and feel very refreshed in the morning when you do get up. And so thanks for watching, and I'll talk to y'all later. So, since I have not done this before, how do I get this thing to turn off and save it?